When a single mother couldn't afford her groceries, a young cashier made a choice that would change an entire community forever. The bright lights of Valley Market grocery store seemed harsher than usual as Lisa walked through the automatic doors. Her 8-year-old daughter Sophie skipped beside her, while 4-year-old Jake rode in the shopping cart, his small hands wrapped around his favorite toy dinosaur. Lisa pulled out her phone and opened the calculator app, the cracked screen reflecting her tired face. Lisa had done this dance so many times before. Every grocery trip had become a careful math problem. She had exactly $47 in her wallet, and it needed to stretch for an entire week of meals for her small family. 3 months ago, everything had changed when the small office where she worked as a bookkeeper suddenly closed down. The owner said business was slow, and just like that, 12 people lost their jobs. Walking down the cereal aisle, Lisa felt the weight of every decision. Sophie tugged on her sleeve, pointing to a colorful box with cartoon characters dancing. Across the front, the price tag read $4.50. Lisa looked at her daughter's hopeful face and felt her heart break a little more. She gently steered the cart toward the generic cereals that cost half the price. "Maybe next time, sweetheart," Lisa whispered, hating herself for making another promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Sophie nodded with the kind of understanding that no 8-year-old should have to develop. It amazed Lisa how quickly children learned to read between the lines when money became tight. The unemployment checks helped, but they barely covered rent and utilities. Lisa had already sold her grandmother's pearl necklace, the one thing she'd planned to pass down to Sophie someday. She'd also parted with her wedding ring, though the marriage had ended 2 years ago when her ex-husband decided he wasn't ready for the responsibility of family life. The pawn shop owner had been kind but firm about the prices. Jewelry didn't hold its value the way people hoped it would. Moving through the produce section, Lisa picked up the fresh strawberries that Sophie loved so much. They were on sale for $3 a container. She held them for a moment, remembering how Sophie's face would light up when she bit into the sweet, juicy fruit. But $3 could buy a whole bag of rice or pasta that would last several meals. With a heavy sigh, Lisa put the strawberries back and reached for a bag of frozen mixed vegetables instead. Every aisle brought new calculations. The milk was $5, but they couldn't go without it. Jake was still growing, and Sophie needed it for her cereal in the mornings. The bread was $2.50 for the cheap brand, but it would have to do. Lisa had learned to make French toast from stale bread, turning yesterday's leftovers into something that felt special for the kids. In the meat section, Lisa stared at the chicken breasts that used to be a regular part of their meals. Now, ground turkey was cheaper and could be stretched into multiple meals. She could make turkey tacos one night, turkey pasta another night, and maybe turkey soup with the frozen vegetables. One package could feed them for 3 days if she was creative enough. The weight of constant worry sat heavy on Lisa's shoulders. She'd applied to dozens of jobs, but the competition was fierce. For every opening, there were 50 other people just like her, desperate for work and willing to take whatever was offered. The job interviews had become a routine of hope followed by disappointment. "We'll call you," they would say, but the phone rarely rang with good news. At night, after the children were asleep, Lisa would sit at her kitchen table with a calculator, a pile of bills, and a calendar. She would count and recount, trying to make the numbers work in their favor. The eviction notice was folded and tucked inside her purse, a constant reminder that time was running out. She had 2 weeks to come, up with next month's rent, or they would have to find somewhere else to live. The thought of moving scared her more than anything. Sophie was settled in her school, finally making friends after the difficult divorce. Jake was comfortable with his daycare routine. Lisa couldn't bear the thought of uprooting their lives again, but keeping a roof over their heads was becoming harder each day. As she continued shopping, Lisa noticed other families in the store. Some filled their carts without looking at prices, their children choosing snacks and treats without a second thought. She remembered when that had been her life too, before everything fell apart. Those days seemed like a different lifetime now. Sophie had stopped asking for things she wanted, and that broke Lisa's heart more than any empty bank account could. Children should be able to dream about toys and treats, not worry about whether their mom could afford milk. Jake was too young to understand. But Sophie had become wise beyond her years, learning to want less and expect disappointment. The store was busy with families doing their weekly shopping. Lisa watched as other parents casually added items to their carts, never pausing to calculate or worry. She wondered if they realized how lucky they were, or if financial security was something people only noticed when it was gone. Lisa had certainly taken it for granted when she'd had it. Moving toward the checkout lines, Lisa felt the familiar flutter of anxiety in her stomach. This was always the hardest part when all the careful calculations would be put to the test. She had done the math 3 times, but grocery prices seemed to change daily, and she might have missed something. Sophie walked quietly beside the cart now, sensing her mother's tension. Jake played with his dinosaur, making soft roaring sounds that usually made Lisa smile. Today, even her son's innocent joy couldn't lift the worry from her heart. She was about to face another test of just how far $47 could stretch, hoping against hope that this time, the numbers would work in their favor. The checkout lines at Valley Market were busier than usual for a Thursday afternoon. Lisa pushed her cart toward the shortest line, her heart already starting to race with the familiar pre-checkout anxiety. Behind the register stood a young man, who looked to be in his early 20s with kind eyes and a genuine smile for each customer. His name tag read David, and he moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been doing this job for a while. David had been working at Valley Market for almost 2 years now, ever since he started community college. The part-time job helped him pay for his classes and textbooks, while also supporting his grandmother who lived on a fixed income. He'd seen all kinds of customers during his shifts, from wealthy families who barely glanced at prices to elderly people counting out exact change from their coin purses. Each person had a story, and David had learned to read the subtle signs of financial stress. As Lisa approached his register, David immediately noticed something different about her. The way she carefully unloaded each item from her cart, checking the prices one more time before placing them on the conveyor belt. The way her children stood quietly beside her, the older girl watching her mother's face with concern that seemed too mature for her age. The younger boy played with his toy dinosaur, unaware of the tension building around him. Lisa's hands were slightly shaky as she organized her items. She had done the math in her head countless times throughout the store, but now, facing the actual moment of truth, doubt crept in. Had she remembered to account for tax? Were the sale prices she had calculated actually correct? The fluorescent lights above seemed too bright, and she could feel sweat forming on her forehead despite the store's air conditioning. David began scanning items with his usual rhythm, but he found himself slowing down slightly. Something about this customer made him pay closer attention. He noticed the generic brands, the careful selection of only essential items, the absence of any treats or extras that most families would typically include in their weekly shopping. The milk, bread, eggs, rice, frozen vegetables, and ground turkey painted a picture of someone stretching every dollar as far as it would go. Sophie stood close to her mother, occasionally glancing up at David with curious eyes. She had learned to read the checkout process like a weather vane for her family's financial situation. When her mom looked relaxed during checkout, Sophie knew everything was okay. When her mom looked worried like she did right now, Sophie knew they might have to put some things back. The register display climbed steadily as David scanned each item. $23, $31, $38. Lisa watched the numbers with growing dread, her mental calculations seeming to fall apart under the pressure of the moment. She had been so careful, so precise in her planning, but somehow the numbers weren't adding up the way they should. David noticed Lisa's increasing anxiety as the total grew. He had seen this exact scenario play out dozens of times before. Usually it ended with embarrassed customers putting items back while other people in line grew impatient. He had always felt sorry for these customers, but company policy was clear about what cashiers could and couldn't do in these situations. Behind Lisa, a small line was forming. A businessman in an expensive suit checked his watch impatiently, tapping his foot while scrolling through emails on his phone. An elderly woman with a full cart waited patiently, but Lisa could feel the weight of their presence behind her. The pressure of holding up the line added another layer of stress to an already difficult situation. $44, $47, $50. Lisa's face went pale as she watched the numbers climb past her carefully budgeted amount. Her heart sank as David continued scanning the remaining items. She had miscalculated somewhere, and now she was about to face the humiliation of having to choose which necessities to put back. David finished scanning the last item and hit the total button. The final amount flashed on the screen, $52.73. The silence that followed felt heavy and uncomfortable. Lisa stared at the number, her mind racing to figure out what she could possibly eliminate from her essential purchases. "I'm sorry," Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the store's refrigeration units. "I need to put some things back. I only have $47. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she reached for the milk, thinking it might be the easiest item to do without, even though she knew Jake needed it. David watched as Lisa's composure began to crumble. Her hands trembled as she reached for items to remove from her purchase. Sophie moved closer to her mother, instinctively trying to offer comfort. Jake continued playing with his dinosaur, blissfully, unaware that his family was experiencing another moment of financial crisis. The businessman behind them sighed audibly and made an exaggerated show of checking his watch again. The elderly woman leaned forward slightly, trying to see what was causing the delay. Lisa felt the weight of their impatience and moved faster, her movements becoming more frantic as she tried to quickly decide what her family could live without. David had seen this scene before, but something about Lisa and her children touched him differently. Maybe it was the way Sophie tried to comfort her mother, or the way Jake held his toy dinosaur like a security blanket. Maybe it was the careful way Lisa had selected only the most essential items, or the defeated look in her eyes as she realized she couldn't even afford the basics. In that moment, David made a decision that would change the course of everyone's day. He thought about his own childhood, when his grandmother had raised him after his parents died in a car accident. He remembered the times when kind strangers had helped them when money was tight, and how those small acts of kindness had made enormous differences in their lives. David reached toward his wallet, his heart racing as he prepared to do something that went against store policy but felt absolutely right in his heart. The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility and the potential for human kindness to triumph over rules and regulations. "Ma'am, please don't put anything back," David said softly, his voice cutting through Lisa's panic like a gentle hand on a troubled shoulder. His words seemed to hang in the air for a moment, as if the entire store had paused to listen. Lisa looked up from the milk carton she was about to remove, confusion and disbelief written across her face. David's hand was already reaching into his back pocket, pulling out a worn leather wallet that had seen better days. It was the same wallet his grandmother had given him for his 16th birthday, back when he thought $20 was a fortune. Now at 22, working his way through college one shift at a time, he understood the real value of money. More importantly, he understood the value of kindness. "Let me cover the difference," David said, pulling out a $10 bill. The money represented 2 hours of work for him, 2 hours of standing on his feet, dealing with difficult customers, and cleaning up spills in the aisles. But seeing Lisa's face, watching Sophie try to be brave for her mother, hearing Jake's innocent humming as he played with his dinosaur, David knew this was exactly where his money needed to go. Lisa stared at the young cashier, her eyes filling with tears that she had been holding back for weeks. "I can't let you do that," she managed to say, though her voice cracked with emotion. "You don't even know me. Why would you help a complete stranger?" The words came out in a rush, mixed with disbelief and gratitude and the overwhelming feeling of being seen by another human being. David smiled, and for the first time in months, Lisa saw genuine warmth from someone outside her small family circle. "You don't need to know someone to help them," he said simply. "We've all been in tough spots. Sometimes a little kindness is all it takes to turn someone's day around." He thought about his grandmother, who had taught him that helping others wasn't about what you could afford to give, but about what you couldn't afford not to give. The businessman behind them, who had been tapping his foot impatiently just moments before, stopped checking his phone. His expression softened as he watched the young cashier's act of generosity. The elderly woman behind him dabbed at her eyes with a tissue from her purse, remembering times in her own life when strangers had shown her unexpected kindness. Sophie tugged on her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mommy, the nice man wants to help us." Her 8-year-old understanding of the situation was simple and clear. Sometimes grown-ups helped other grown-ups, just like when she shared her crayons with classmates who forgot theirs. It made perfect sense to her young heart. Jake, sensing that something important was happening even though he didn't fully understand what, held up his toy dinosaur toward David. "This is Rex," he announced proudly. "He protects people." It was his way of offering something valuable in return for the kindness being shown to his family. The simple gesture brought smiles to the faces of everyone watching. David accepted the introduction to Rex with the seriousness that Jake's offer deserved. "Nice to meet you, Rex," he said, gently touching the toy dinosaur's head. "I bet you take good care of Jake and his family." Jake beamed with pride, feeling like he had contributed something important to this moment. Lisa wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself, but the tears kept coming. They weren't just tears of relief, though that was certainly part of it. They were tears of gratitude for being reminded that good people still existed in the world. After months of rejection letters, closed doors, and mounting bills, she had almost forgotten that kindness existed outside of her small family unit. "I don't know how to thank you," Lisa said, her voice steadier now but still thick with emotion. "This means more than you can possibly know. My children and I, we've been struggling since I lost my job, and sometimes it feels like the whole world has forgotten we exist." David processed Lisa's payment, adding his own $10 to make up the difference. As he handed her the receipt, he said, "Sometimes the world gets busy and people forget to look out for each other, but that doesn't mean we stop trying to be good to one another." The elderly woman behind them, whose name was Margaret, had been listening to the entire exchange. She stepped forward and gently touched Lisa's arm. "Excuse me, dear," she said kindly. "I couldn't help but overhear. You mentioned losing your job?" When Lisa nodded, Margaret continued, "My son owns a small accounting firm downtown. They've been looking for someone with bookkeeping experience. Would you be interested in his phone number?" Lisa's eyes widened in surprise. 2 acts of kindness in the span of 5 minutes felt almost too good to be true. "Yes," she said quickly. "Yes, I would be very interested. I have 5 years of experience in bookkeeping." Margaret pulled out a small notebook from her purse and wrote down her son's information, along with her own name as a reference. The businessman, whose name was Robert, had been watching the entire scene unfold. He stepped forward and pulled out his business card. "I'm not hiring right now," he said, "but I know several companies in town who are. Take my card. If you call me tomorrow, I can make a few phone calls and see what's available." Lisa looked around at these strangers who had suddenly become her support system. David, the young cashier who had started it all with his simple act of generosity. Margaret, the grandmother who saw an opportunity to help and took it. Robert, the businessman who had transformed from an impatient customer into an ally. Even other customers in nearby lines had begun to pay attention, drawn by the positive energy radiating from their small group. Sophie watched everything with wide eyes, learning a lesson about human nature that no school could teach. She saw how one person's kindness had created a chain reaction, bringing out the best in everyone around them. Jake continued playing with Rex, happy that everyone seemed happier than they had been just a few minutes earlier. David finished bagging their groceries, handling each item with extra care. As he placed the last bag in their cart, he said, "I hope things turn around for you and your family real soon." He meant every word, and something told him that this encounter was going to be a turning point for all of them. Lisa pushed her cart toward the exit, her children walking beside her, all 3 of them carrying themselves a little taller than when they had entered the store. Behind them, David prepared for his next customer, but the warmth from his act of kindness continued to radiate through the store, touching everyone who had witnessed it and reminding them all that sometimes the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact on someone's life. Word traveled fast in a small town like Millbrook, and Valley Market was no exception. Within minutes of Lisa leaving the store with her children, the story of David's kindness began to spread like ripples on a calm pond. Margaret, the elderly woman who had given Lisa her son's contact information, couldn't stop talking about what she had witnessed as she continued her own shopping. At the customer service desk, Margaret approached the young woman working behind the counter. Her name was Amy, and she had been dealing with complaints and returns all day. Margaret's face was still glowing with the warmth of what she had just experienced. "Excuse me, dear," Margaret said, leaning across the counter conspiratorially. "I just witnessed the most wonderful thing at checkout line 3. Amy looked up from her paperwork, expecting another complaint about expired coupons or pricing errors. Instead, Margaret began telling the story of how David had helped a struggling mother pay for her groceries. As Margaret spoke, her voice filled with genuine admiration, Amy found herself leaning forward, drawn into the tale of unexpected kindness. "He'd just reached into his own wallet," Margaret continued, her eyes sparkling. "No hesitation at all. That young man has a heart of gold, and I think your manager should know about it." Amy had worked in customer service long enough to know that most people only approached her desk when they were upset about something. Hearing a story of praise, especially one this touching, was like finding a flower growing through concrete. Amy picked up the phone and called for the store manager, Michael Chen. Michael had been running Valley Market for 8 years, and he prided himself on hiring good people. He had noticed David's work ethic and positive attitude during his time at the store, but this story revealed something deeper about the young man's character. Michael made his way to checkout line 3, where David was helping another customer. He watched quietly as David worked, noting the genuine smile, the patient way he handled each person, and the extra care he took with elderly customers who needed help loading their bags. After the customer left, Michael approached the register. "David, can I speak with you for a moment?" Michael asked, his tone neutral enough that David couldn't tell if he was in trouble or not. They walked to a quiet corner near the produce section, away from the busy checkout area. David's heart raced, wondering if someone had complained about him helping Lisa. He knew that technically, he had violated store policy by using his own money during a transaction. "Is everything okay, Mr. Chen?" David asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Michael smiled and placed a hand on David's shoulder. "I just heard about what you did for that young mother and her children. Margaret Henderson made sure to tell me the whole story." David relaxed slightly, realizing he wasn't in trouble. "I want you to know that what you did reflects the kind of values we want to see in our employees." As they talked, other employees began to gather nearby, having heard bits and pieces of the story throughout the store. Janet from the deli counter, who had been working there for 15 years, wiped her hands on her apron and joined the conversation. "That's the David I know," she said with a proud smile, "always helping customers carry heavy items to their cars, always patient with everyone." Tom from the produce department nodded in agreement. "Just last week I saw him help an elderly gentleman who had dropped his groceries in the parking lot. Didn't think twice about it." The stories began flowing as employees shared their own observations of David's character, painting a picture of someone who consistently chose kindness over convenience. News of the incident reached beyond just the store employees. Robert, the businessman who had given Lisa his business card, was having lunch at the diner across the street when he mentioned the story to his usual waitress, Carol. Carol had known Lisa casually from when she used to come in for coffee during her work breaks, back when she had a steady job. "That's Lisa Williams," Carol said, her face lighting up with recognition. "She used to work at Peterson's Accounting before they closed down. Sweetest woman you'd ever meet, and those kids of hers are just angels. She's been having such a hard time lately." Carol's heart swelled knowing that Lisa had encountered kindness when she needed it most. The story continued to spread throughout the small community. At the local coffee shop, customers discussed the young cashier who had shown such generosity. At the community center, where people gathered for various activities, the tale became a reminder that good people still existed in their town. Back at Valley Market, The afternoon shift change brought new employees who quickly heard about David's act of kindness. The story served as inspiration for everyone, reminding them that their jobs were about more than just scanning barcodes and counting change. They were part of a community, and small acts of kindness could make enormous differences in people's lives. Michael made a decision that surprised even himself. He called David back to his office later that afternoon and offered him a promotion to assistant manager. "I've been watching your work for months," Michael explained. "But what you did today showed me the kind of leader you could become. You didn't just help a customer. You reminded all of us why we do this work." David was speechless. The promotion came with a raise that would help him pay for school and better support his grandmother. But more than the money, it was the recognition that his values aligned with what the community needed. He thought about his grandmother's teachings about treating others with dignity and respect, and he knew she would be proud. The story of kindness at Valley Market reached the local newspaper. By evening, the editor, a woman named Patricia who believed in highlighting positive community news, decided to feature the story in the next day's edition. She called the store to get more details, and Michael was happy to provide them. That evening, as David finished his shift, co-workers and customers continued to approach him with words of appreciation. Some shared their own stories of times when strangers had helped them through difficult moments. Others promised to pay the kindness forward in their own lives. The simple act of one young man reaching into his wallet had created something beautiful in their small community. It reminded everyone that kindness was contagious, that compassion could spread just as quickly as negativity, and that sometimes the smallest gestures had the power to restore faith in humanity. 3 weeks later, the bell above the door of Valley Market chimed as Lisa entered with Sophie and Jake. But this time, everything was different. Lisa walked with her shoulders back and her head high, carrying herself like someone who had rediscovered hope. Sophie skipped beside her, no longer burdened with the worry that had become too familiar for an 8-year-old. Jake rode in the cart, his toy dinosaur Rex perched proudly on the handle, ready for another grocery store adventure. Lisa's first day at Henderson Accounting had been everything she had hoped for and more. Margaret's son, Jonathan, had been impressed with her experience and grateful for his mother's recommendation. The small firm handled books for local businesses, and they desperately needed someone with Lisa's skills. The salary wasn't huge, but it was steady, and for the first time in months, Lisa could plan beyond just the next week. The job had come with other blessings, too. Jonathan's wife had mentioned that their daughter attended the same school as Sophie, and they had arranged carpools that helped Lisa save money on gas. The Henderson family had welcomed Lisa and her children into their circle of friends, providing not just employment, but a sense of community that had been missing from their lives. As Lisa pushed her cart through the familiar aisles of Valley Market, she noticed how different the shopping experience felt when money wasn't the primary concern. She could actually consider what Sophie and Jake might enjoy eating, rather than just what would keep them fed. The fresh strawberries that Sophie loved were back on the shopping list, along with Jake's favorite yogurt and other small luxuries that had been impossible just a few weeks earlier. In the cereal aisle, Sophie pointed to the colorful box with cartoon characters that she had wanted before. "Can we get that one this time, Mommy?" she asked, but without the desperate hope that had marked such requests in the past. She had learned that sometimes the answer was no, and that was okay too. "Of course we can," Lisa said, placing the box in their cart with a smile. "And maybe we can get some of those strawberries you love too." Sophie's face lit up with genuine joy, not just because of the cereal, but because she could hear the lightness in her mother's voice that had been missing for so long. They made their way through the store, Lisa adding items to their cart with the freedom that financial stability provided. She included ingredients for homemade cookies, thinking about how much fun it would be to bake with the children over the weekend. She added fresh vegetables for salads, protein for proper meals, and even a small bouquet of flowers to brighten their kitchen table. As they approached the checkout area, Lisa looked for David's familiar face. She had been hoping to see him during this return visit, wanting to thank him again and share the good news about how his kindness had changed their lives. She spotted him at Register 3, the same place where their lives had intersected weeks earlier. Lisa deliberately chose his line, even though other registers had shorter waits. She wanted this moment, needed it really, to complete the circle of gratitude that had been growing in her heart since that difficult day. Sophie and Jake seemed to remember David too, and they waved at him as they approached. David's face broke into a genuine smile when he saw them. He had wondered about Lisa and her children many times since that day, hoping that things had improved for their family. Seeing them looking healthier and happier with a cart full of groceries that included both necessities and treats told him everything he needed to know. "Well, look who's back," David said warmly as he began scanning their items. "You all look great. I hope things have been going better for you." His tone was gentle and genuinely interested, not prying but clearly caring about their well-being. Lisa's eyes sparkled as she prepared to share her news. "David, I can't thank you enough for what you did that day. Your kindness changed everything, for our family." She reached into her purse and pulled out a handmade card. "The children and I made this for you." The card was covered with Sophie's careful drawings of grocery store scenes and Jake's enthusiastic scribbles that he insisted were dinosaurs helping people. Inside, Lisa had written a heartfelt message about how David's generosity had restored her faith in humanity and led to a series of positive changes in their lives. "I got the job," Lisa continued, her voice filled with pride and gratitude. "Margaret Henderson's son hired me at his accounting firm, and Robert, the businessman who was in line behind us, he made some phone calls that led to other opportunities too. Your one act of kindness created this amazing chain reaction." David felt a warmth spread through his chest as he listened to Lisa's story. His simple decision to help had grown into something much larger than he had ever imagined. "I'm so happy to hear that," he said, meaning every word. "You deserve all the good things that are coming your way." Sophie stepped closer to the register and said, "Mr. David, my mommy smiles a lot more now, and we can buy strawberries whenever we want them." Her innocent observation captured the essence of how their lives had changed, from survival mode to actually living with joy. Jake held up his dinosaur Rex and announced, "Rex says thank you too. He likes grocery stores now because nice people work here." His simple statement brought smiles to everyone within hearing distance, including other customers in line who were enjoying the heartwarming reunion. As David finished scanning their groceries, he noticed the flowers Lisa had included in her purchase. "Special occasion?" he asked, nodding toward the colorful bouquet. "Just because we can," Lisa replied with a laugh. "I realized we don't need a special reason to have beautiful things in our lives. Sometimes just being grateful is reason enough." The flowers represented more than decoration. They symbolized hope, beauty, and the luxury of thinking beyond just basic survival. The total came to $78, well within Lisa's new budget. As she handed David her debit card, she felt none of the anxiety that had once accompanied every grocery transaction. Instead, she felt grateful for the journey that had brought them to this moment. Other customers in line had been listening to their conversation, and several approached Lisa as she prepared to leave. They shared their own stories of times when strangers had helped them, creating an impromptu community gathering right there in the checkout area. The spirit of kindness that David had initiated continued to spread, touching new people and inspiring new acts of compassion. As Lisa and her children headed toward the exit with their full cart of groceries, David watched them go with a heart full of satisfaction. He had learned that sometimes the smallest gestures could have the most profound impacts, and that kindness was indeed contagious. The story of their encounter had become local legend, reminding everyone in Millbrook that they lived in a community where people looked out for each other. David's promotion to assistant manager had allowed him to create policies that encouraged employees to go above and beyond for customers in need, turning one moment of kindness into a lasting culture of compassion. That evening, as Lisa prepared dinner with fresh ingredients and watched her children play happily in their secure home, she reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed. The eviction notice that had once haunted her purse had been replaced with a lease renewal. The constant worry about money had been replaced with the ability to plan for the future. But perhaps most importantly, David's kindness had reminded Lisa that she and her children were not alone in the world. They were part of a community that cared, surrounded by people who were willing to help when times got tough. That knowledge gave her strength and hope that would last far beyond any job or paycheck. The simple act of one young man reaching into his wallet had created ripples the